From breakthrough strategies to game-changing innovations and cultural shifts, you'll discover the lessons that drive real impact, and we'll dive into the moments that changed everything. Welcome to The Missing Piece with April Reed. Today, I'm excited to welcome John Amato to the podcast. John is a seasoned trainer and leadership development professional with more than 3 decades of experience helping people and teams grow. As the Director of Training and Consultation at Family Links, John has spent his career developing curriculum, strengthening leadership competencies, improving team performance, and equipping aspiring leaders to step into their full potential. With a master's degree in education from the University of Pittsburgh and a long-standing commitment to human services, John brings a unique blend of wisdom, heart, and practical experience to today's conversation. John, I'm really happy to have you. Welcome to the Missing Piece podcast.
Thanks, April. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm excited. I know today we're going to talk a lot about training, leadership, development, what works for corporations, what doesn't, etc. But introduce yourself, John. For those of our guests that don't know you, tell us more about who you are and your background.
Well, I am currently, I'm a senior training consultant at Family Links. I allegedly retired 2 years ago, but still find myself doing some work here. But I started in 1980 as a drug and alcohol therapist in our outpatient services. Did that for about 5 years, did a couple of years in prevention, and then eventually moved into training. For folks who don't know, Family Links has been around for about 65 years, and we've been proudly serving individuals and families, primarily in Western Pennsylvania, but we do have some services now out in the eastern part of the state, which is exciting. So we basically deliver and coordinate services for families and individuals who are struggling with mental and behavioral health, substance abuse disorders, housing insecurity, and even helping folks stay active as they age.
That's incredible. Remind me, you just told me, how long have you been at Family Links?
Since 1980.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's been around for so long. So I know we're jumping ahead to your retirement, but you said you try to retire and you're still not retiring. I mean, what is that? Tell me more, because usually it's people just love what they do. Or
Once I got into training, I realized that I found my niche, that I enjoy it. I enjoy interacting with people, serving people with information that hopefully helps them in their careers and their development. So even though I've been doing that since like 1992, when I retired, I offered to stay casual and continue to do the training part of the work. So I don't have the administrative responsibilities and all that other stuff that comes with, that level of leadership. So I'm enjoying myself, to be honest,
Yeah, that's awesome. You always want to love what you do. And so one of the reasons how we connected is just because of your training background. And you have a degree in education, but when did you first realize that you loved being a trainer and the impact that training has?
Actually, that started for me when I moved into our prevention services. At the time I moved into that, prevention services were not as formalized as they became later. So it was basically, putting together training, or at that time, like workshops. And I would do workshops for parent groups. I would do workshops in schools. Basically whoever would have me, I would go do these workshops. And most of them focused at the time on substance abuse and substance education. And I just really liked it a lot. So when Family Links had an opportunity in 1987 or 88, under contract with Allegheny County Children, Youth, and Family Services to provide residential services for troubled youth, we added a part in our proposal for a small training program. And the thought behind that was, if we're going to have staff working with these children who have been through challenges and can be challenging in their behavior, We want to make sure that they're doing it right. We want to make sure that they're providing a safe environment, a supportive environment. And that's really how it started. From that point to today, it's grown significantly, but it really started with the idea of we need to develop staff for them to be competent in what we're asking them to do.
Yeah. So you transition over to this training role. What are all the pieces of, people that you're training? Are you training the families? Are you training the staff? Are you training both? And back then, before e-learning was a thing and all the things, how were you training and how did you measure that impact?
Well, we all of our trainings were live. So it was either here at our facility, for our internal staff, our Family Link staff, all of our trainings were here in our training center. In like 1993, we started to offer offer those trainings and more to other organizations. So we would send out a brochure and people would register, and we started to get a reputation for providing those types of services as well. And we, at one point, there were two of us. At the time, the director of training and myself, we were doing trainings in Pittsburgh. We were running to Erie, doing trainings there. And for a short period of time, we actually were in Cleveland doing training. So it was pretty crazy.
Mhm.
But it was the opportunity to give people and social services a lot of times. And unfortunately, training is not the top of the list in terms of budgeting and all the constraints that come with that. So we were happy to be able to provide that opportunity for folks.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit as well because looking at corporate America, looking at clinics, looking at social services, mental health facilities. I've been in the healthcare space for 26 years. With that being said, to your point, training's been almost last on the what we should cut. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? If we're going to cut, it's in last place and they cut it. It sounds like Family Links, you've been there for a long time, so we can especially talk to Family Links that maybe one of the secrets to their success was the fact that they invested in training. Do you think that that is also why Family Links has been so successful? That they, never cut that training and instead invested in it more than anything?
Yeah, I think that the quality of service that we want our staff to provide can only reach that quality level if we provide them the tools they need in order to successfully work with the people that we serve.
Yeah.
So we train our line staffs, we train our supervisors, we train our directors. And fortunately for me, Family Links has always been committed to training because I think we know what the benefits are. I mean,
Yeah.
and actually beyond what we know, the research is out there that talks about the value of training. But to your point, sometimes when times get tight and you have to cut, it's those types of services that tend to go first.
Yeah. When research actually says like the complete opposite, don't cut the training because the value add will improve the bottom line, will add the return on the investment, will keep your employees happy, will build new leadership and new programs and placements. So research does prove otherwise when it comes to why you should keep training. So
Absolutely.
in regards to leadership, John, you obviously are an executive leader in your role and with a wealth of experience. But what do you think sets leaders apart in that are in executive positions, that are trainers and leaders, kind of setting the stage for companies or healthcare facilities as a whole?
Well, it's an interesting question because to me, it's the age old question of what are leaders versus what are managers, right? And the short answer is leaders inspire. They emphasize vision. They push people to be the best that they can be. They motivate teams. They create an environment of trust. Whereas managers tend to do more execution focus, structural focus, making sure that the day-to-day work gets done. In my thinking, a really effective leader needs to be able to do both. right? I can't just inspire people. I have to make sure the work gets done as well. Certainly the inspiring helps that, and the creating a vision for teams provides that. But I also have to keep my hands on the nuts and bolts of making sure we're successful.
Yeah, I love that. And I really like the way you just defined the leadership versus the management. I completely agree. And so fast forwarding to current state, you've been training a long time. You said back then everything was live. Then during COVID, we went to this element of virtual training, probably via Zoom and other forms of training. Tell me, John, from your experience, what are all the different ways to train? And from your personal opinion, what is the ideal approach to training?
Well, it's funny because like a month before the pandemic hit that point where everybody had to work from home, that was like, or I was in March of that year. My schedule was really booked from March till June, all with live trainings.
Mm,
And the word came down like, we're not doing live trainings. You have to do webinars. Well, I've been in training for a long time, but I've never had to that point, never done a webinar. So I would say my regression was pretty significant for the first couple months until I got certified in how to do virtual training and what were all the benefits of using a platform like Zoom. That's the one we use. So what it opened my eyes to, though, was when we were doing live trainings here, we pretty much pulled people from maybe at the farthest someone who lived 2 hours from here, but pretty pretty much in this area. What I noticed about the advantage of webinars, because we were able to advertise across the state, was we were getting people from like Philadelphia, from Harrisburg to join our webinars. So that was a big like eye opener for me of the benefits of doing that type of presentation. I may be old fashioned, but it's still my favorite way to train is live.
mm,
There's an energy there. I was just with a group last week, and their excitement and their participation really just kind of pulled out of me my excitement. And
mhm.
not that you can't get that to a point with a webinar, but it is a little more challenging. In a live training, you can't turn your camera off. In a webinar, that happens. But I think in terms of delivery, there's a lot of benefit. Any organization that wants to truly create a training program for their staff, a lot of, especially social service, we have part-time or casual employees. Sometimes those are webinars, the learning platforms. Now, a lot of them come with prepackaged trainings
Right,
and record keeping and all of that. That's can be beneficial as well for someone who can't leave a spot for a full day.
right.
So I think all of them, but a combination of them, in
Mhm.
my opinion, is most effective. At some point, you have to have the contact with people. I
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's got to be hybrid approaches to all of training. But here's the real question. I'm curious your opinion. People get trained, they're in a class, they're there, they're excited, they had a great day, they learned a lot of information, then they walk out the door. Then they get off the Zoom and then they forget. There's lots of statistics that the retention is low when it comes to training. How do we change that? How do we change it to make sure that the retention sticks?
I think there's a couple things. I think the first thing is the mindset. You know,
Mm,
and I'm sure from your experience in working in healthcare, there are certain trainings that we're required to have, right?
right.
So if I'm your supervisor and I want to make sure you get to that training because you're required to have it, you go have it, come back, and I get a check mark. You did it. Good. I'm done. Wash my hands of it. Right. And I think so many times it's that one and done. Just get him in that training so we could say that we did it. Right.
Mm,
I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, John, I was in a training you did 7 years ago." And I'll say, "Well, what was the training?" And they'll be, "I don't remember, but I know we had fun." I appreciate that they remembered me, but it's sort of disheartening that 6 hours, 3 hours we spent together, there's nothing that you remember from that training, let alone the title, right? So I think organizations, companies that are serious about developing a meaningful training program need to create what in the industry they call transfer of learning or transfer of knowledge,
Mm.
right? And I think a lot of times, even the best intentioned training programs, if they don't have that, then to your point, within a month, people are going to forget any of the key elements that they learned in a given training.
I like this transfer of learning approach, like you're saying, versus just a one-time event or a one-time classroom or a one-time webinar. There's this transfer of the learning that sticks. So when you see them again, they're like, oh my gosh, I've applied those principles to my life and it completely changed my life. I mean, that's probably the best thing that you could possibly hear from others. And I think, even in leadership or in executive training as a whole or any type of training, that's what you want. You taught me this, I applied it, it made the difference.
Right.
That's what we want, that complete transfer. So what is your advice to supervisors and to executives and to trainers and to leadership on how to implement that transfer of learning into their organizations?
Well, April, I think one of the things is it needs to be structured,
Mm.
right? It's so you send, as an example, you send someone to a training. If I'm your supervisor, then I should be able to tell you, I'd like you to go to this training because, and explain the whys. This is what I hope you get out of it. This is what I want you to pay attention to. And I want to make sure that during the training day, as best as possible, nobody interrupts you, that you can really focus on that training time. And then after the training, it's really the supervisor saying, okay, let's talk about the training you were just in and let's set up a goal or goals as to how can I implement what I learned. Now, the trick to that is that at some point, the supervisor needed to attend that training as well. So they're familiar with what the information was. So I think that part of it is really critical. That makes it more of a collaborative process. That makes it more of a professional development process other than a one and done.
Yeah, agreed. I love that. Thank you for that wisdom. So, I've talked to several organizations, specifically with nonprofits or service type organizations. And unfortunately, they either don't have a retraining team because they can't afford it, or, it's the funding, issues, etc. How do you see that this makes an impact for either Family Links or other organizations that you've seen, you know, implementing the success of training and development within their organization?
I think it's possible that, it really comes down to the participant supervisor knowing what that training is. If I send you off to a training somewhere, that I at least know what that training's about. And
Mm.
that when you come back, we have a conversation about how are you going to use this. It's
Yeah.
sort of like at the end of all of my trainings, I have the last activity is let's go around the room. What's one takeaway? And then I encourage people to take that takeaway back to their supervisor and
Mm.
see if they can come up with a plan. Because, like you had said earlier, if I don't hear anything or review anything from a training, some of the research says 30 days, you've forgotten like 90% of it. And
Right.
that's sort of alarming, to me anyway, as a trainer, that I don't want people to do that. I mean, I don't feel like if you can't remember the key elements of a training after 90 days, something didn't work, something went wrong.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times it is that transfer of learning.
I like that. I feel like that. I don't know if transfer of learning is a key element within leadership development and training, but it needs to be because it's good. I wanted to talk about AI because AI is helping with training so much. You can look things up quickly. You can create, custom content and instructional design. You can enhance the way that learning is done through, video and aesthetics. Have you had much experience in improving the way you train with AI, and or what's your opinion on the future of learning and training within organizations utilizing AI?
I would say that probably I know enough about AI to be dangerous, but I have used it in some instances. I've used it in kind of when we put out our flyer and we have a little description of the training. I run it through AI to make sure that it's languaged in the best way, the most professional way it can be. So I've used it in that context. I haven't used it yet in terms of presentation, using it to actually create a presentation. I'm sure that at some point I will give it a shot. But I think with AI, it's the only challenge I see right now is that it takes the creativity of the person out of the mix. And maybe I'm old school in that regard, but I think like the challenge for a good trainer is to be as creative as you can be,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and engaging, like you said, you're able to, it's eyeball to eyeball. There's nothing like eyeball to eyeball.
Right.
Um,
Well, plus you have people that learn differently,
yeah.
right? So a lot of times in trainings, you'll find trainers will repeat something, but in three different ways. They'll do it visually, they'll do it tactily, they'll do it auditorily. But they'll make sure that we hit all the different styles of learning, in a given period of time.
Yeah. I'm really passionate about training, and that's actually why I never talk about it, but I created a product called Learnista, which is the learning enthusiast. And, it's an application where you can do all three, all of them. You can create e-learning, you can have the video of you, talking to them and training, you can measure it. And because I do think that all of it matters. If you can't be in person, they can still get you in person, but at the same time, you can create content that makes it exciting and fun to learn. The last question as we begin to wrap up is I call the podcast the missing piece because I like to understand if there was either a missing piece moment for you, John, and or the missing piece that you see when it comes to training within, companies, healthcare facilities, etc., that resonates with you. Do you have a missing piece moment or something that you feel is the missing piece?
Yeah, I think that, go back to it, but one of the pieces that we've had a hard time implementing here, even though there is that commitment to training, is that transfer of learning piece. Part of that is because of the diverse programs that we have. So the learning is very different in each of those programs, but trying to figure out a way to get our supervisors to understand their role in the training process. Like it's not just the trainer, it's the trainer, the learner, and the supervisor. That's if you will, the triumvirate for a successful training, right? It is all of them being involved. And if there's anything I've seen at a lot of the organizations I've worked with, is that, you know, um, and in fact, in the last year in contracting with other agencies, I talked to them about either let's add a transfer learning piece or let's come up with a way that we can make sure that people are utilizing the skills that you asked me to come in and teach in the first place. So,
Right.
I think that's probably, and I think that the missing piece for me is I don't know if people appreciate just how important that is, right? That transfer piece, because once you realize how important it is, I think then you're more prone to make a commitment to making sure that that's incorporated in your training process.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think you should write a book before you retire, the experiences of John
I could do it through AI, right?
yeah, exactly. You should. I just think, there's so much wisdom that you would have to share, and thank you for sharing some of it here.
Well, thank you.
I love learning from experience. There's nothing like it. And so thank you for sharing your thoughts around, training and the future and what you've done at Family Links and who Family Links is and the impact that they're making and all the things. If people wanted to get in touch with you, John, how can they get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn best? We'll leave kind of your information.
LinkedIn works for me. Also, emailing works for me. It's jamato@familylinks.org. It's easy to
Amazing.
remember.
Yeah, very easy to remember. Well, any last thoughts, comments?
Only a hope that organizations such as Family Link and other programs that do try really hard to have a relatively positive, strong training program, that you remain committed to that. Because if what you want is your brand, in the communities to be, this is a high quality program, they provide high quality service, then we need to provide people with the tools in order to be able to do that and make that mission for your organization come to life.
I love that. And we will end with that because that is good stuff. I
Okay.
agree. Stay committed and stay with it. Thank you, John. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
inspiring all of us. It really means a lot.
Every leader has a story, and every story reveals another piece of the bigger picture. What if the missing piece wasn't something you had to find, but something you were meant to become? Subscribe, share, and keep leading with intention. I'm April Reed, and I'll see you in the next conversation on The Missing Piece.